You know, looking at the state of video games today, looking at how things have really changed over decades now, things have evolved, trends have shaped how game developers make their games, I think it has been pretty clear to me and to a lot of other people that the live service model seems to be the dominating way that games are made and played today. It's very obvious this is kind of how game developers have sort of shifted their games to revolve around now. What was once the dominating games of the 80s and 90s, Mario, Sonic, Zelda, and then into the early 2000s, you had Halo, Assassin's Creed, BioShock. You know, it's like those are all single-player experiences, but now as we have really gotten into the 2020s, it's very clear that the multiplayer game seems to be, I don't know, the more dominating sort of game style for both developers and consumers. I mean, you've got League of Legends, Valorant, Overwatch, Call of Duty. In fact, I'll actually just go on to Twitch, for example, and I'll see the most popular games right now that are streamed. I feel that the majority of them would not only be multiplayer experiences, but live service games. You know, games that just seemingly have no end, they don't have any sequel or anything, they just have update after update, and they're mainly supported by microtransactions. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. League of Legends is like dominating today. I'm only assuming there's some sort of like a League of Legends event today. Usually that's not in the #1 spot, but like usually #1 is GTA 5, so that's at #2 right now. That, funny enough, has kind of evolved into a live service sort of game. And then yeah, you got Dota 2, Valorant, Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Throne and Liberty. Yeah, so you get the picture. I mean, things have really just changed over time, and so it would kind of be my impression that as these very big developers have seemed to change to this live service model, you know, as this is the developer's preference, it would seem to me that this is also the consumer's preference as well. Gamers don't want single-player games anymore. The majority of gamers want multiplayer games. They want live service games. Well, it turns out I'm actually incorrect about that, and I'm very happy to see that. So there's a group called Midia Research, and they just released a study where they conducted surveys on gamers from many different countries, the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and more over Q1 2023 and Q1 2024. And these surveys were basically to collect data and conclude what is the gamer's preference. And it also looked at the demographics of these gamers to see if demographics kind of changed the answers that they give. Well, to summarize things, it turns out that 53% of gamers actually prefer a single-player experience. Yeah, 53%, so over half. Now, another thing that stood out to me is that age definitely plays a factor in this. So gamers over 55 years old, for example, 74% of that demographic preferred a single-player experience, whereas only 30% of players under the age of 19 preferred single-player. Now, I think that's probably why I had that misconception. I think it's very easy to kind of see what younger people, especially kids, are doing these days in terms of the games that they play, and it's kind of easy to maybe assume that that reflects the general overall trend of how things are. I think a big reason for that is probably because gamers that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and over, well, I mean, you saw the data. They don't play online as much, so yeah, they're probably not streaming as much. They're not talking about it as much. I mean, the single-player experience is just that. It's a single-player experience. You don't really know that other people are doing it because you're not playing with those other people. They're playing the game all by themselves. Now, I also thought this was pretty interesting. So, still over half, 58% of mobile gamers also prefer a single-player experience. I thought this was pretty interesting because, I don't know, I feel like to me a lot of mobile games are also kind of evolving around this live service model, and I would think around a more multiplayer model, but maybe not as much the multiplayer. I think a lot of games on mobile still are live service oriented, but they're just more single player. You have microtransactions, but it's just not for a multiplayer experience. So I find this research to be very interesting for a lot of different reasons, mainly because it shows that while it would seem that the developers and the publishers are really pushing a live service model, and I think they really are, that being said, what the majority of gamers actually prefer is a single player experience at the end of the day. Now, a big reason for this is because, as some people have pointed out in the past, especially for a AAA studio, you know, investing a lot of money into a single player game, I guess could be risky. You know, not as many people might buy the game that you're expecting, and then you're just out that much money, whereas with a live service game, a lot of developers and publishers see that as a much less risky business venture. You just keep making updates as your game is popular, and then, hey, maybe if it loses popularity, then you pull the plug on it. So, you know, I guess don't let what's being streamed on Twitch, you know, what's the most popular trend in video games and streaming and YouTube videos, I guess, you know, it goes to show, don't let that make you think that that's what every video game consumer, or even the majority of video game consumers want. It's very obvious now by this research that actually it would turn out the single-player game is way more preferred than the live service, or at least the multiplayer gaming experience. I don't know if this research has the potential by itself to change the trends of what video game developers are following, but I certainly hope so. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that I think the world could benefit a lot more from more popular and trending single-player games.